Thank you. Thank you. So you've probably seen quite a few vendors in the expo hall showing you products that will save you millions if you buy. And today I'm going to show you how you can build a product using open source, which is free, and get plenty of savings with what you currently have. So I'm Mandy. I'm a cloud automation engineer at Verint, where we specialize in customer experience automation. And I implemented Cloud Custodian and saved $6 million for our company. We were actually one of the highest paying AWS customers in the highest AWS service, customer service bracket. And implementing this actually bumped us down to a lower paying customer service bracket. So that gave ongoing savings. And I did this as an associate engineer back in 2022 with no cloud experience. So before this, I was in systems engineering, and I had just coded in Python. So this is rather simple. And if I can do it, then anybody can. So at Verint, we are a customer experience company now powered by AI. And we provide customer engagement solutions worldwide to help brands enhance customer experience using automation across various touch points between their organization and their customers in contact centers, back office, branch, website, and mobile apps. So an example of a couple of our bots, when you call like Costco and you're complaining, then Verint is recording that call and real-time transcribing the call and helping the call center representative to see what they can say in this call based on previous calls to help the call go successfully for that call center. So it's all powered by AI. We are also a worldwide company, so we're acquiring companies and constantly adding to our product offering and our AWS accounts. So we've got a lot of accounts, a lot of bots, and I am not on a FinOps team. So I am on the infrastructure as a service team. And like what we heard at the fireside chat this morning, what your role is determines what challenges you face in FinOps. So my role is rather different. I'm not in any meetings. I'm not making big decisions. I'm just implementing the solutions that I'm told to implement. So this is my org chart from my perspective. So I'm an engineer in the cloud infrastructure team. And I think most of you would be in the FinOps cloud cost optimization bubble. They're on the right. We also work with networking. I do CI/CD pipelines for them, deploying developer enablement. So we deploy infrastructure that our engineering team is putting the products on to sell to the customers. Okay, so lots of Terraform, Kubernetes, EKS, Lambdas, Rust. And most people that are deploying things don't have admin, but I kind of had that from the get-go. My manager just gave me admin and said, please don't break stuff. So I was learning code, and I was learning cloud and learning cost at the same time. So another stereotype is that engineers don't care about cost and they just are trying to get their work done. But as I was learning the cloud, I was also doing one of my first projects was a cost savings initiative, which was implementing Cloud Custodian. And so as I was learning cloud, I was also learning about the cost of these cloud resources, and I was enjoying it quite a bit. So how many of you know what Cloud Custodian is? Okay, how many of you have implemented Cloud Custodian at your company? Okay, and how many of you don't know what Cloud Custodian is? Okay, great. So Cloud Custodian is an open source SDK, which is a software development kit. Open source means it's free. All of the code is online on GitHub. So you can go to that link and see the current Cloud Custodian repository. And the default deployment of Cloud Custodian is by Lambda functions in your account and your region. So Cloud Custodian is run by YAML policies that basically filter through your cloud resources, and based on the filters, it will do some sort of action. And I'll show you some policies later. But those are deployed in your account per policy, per region, and per account. So in our instance, we have over 100 AWS accounts, and we also have this deployed in a couple other clouds, but we're just talking about AWS today. And we didn't want to deploy hundreds of Lambda functions. So for each policy, we have multiple policies. We have like about 20 policies that we're currently running. And so that would be 20 policies per region, and we have maybe 16 regions per account. And then we have 100 of accounts, so that is thousands of Lambda functions with the default version, default mode of implementing Cloud Custodian. So my manager said, we want to do Cloud Custodian because it's open source, figure it out in a way where we don't have Lambda functions everywhere, because we don't want all of our accounts to be able to tamper with these functions and mess them up when we have them working. So the way that I came up with was an invoker function, Lambda function, that calls a child Lambda function that contains the Cloud Custodian SDK. And I tweaked the innards of the SDK to accept account number and a repo, and then assume a IAM role that I deployed to all of the accounts that had all the privileges that Cloud Custodian needed to do all of the policies. So the invoker function loops through a master list of all of our accounts and then calls the child function based on what account that is. So we've got the master list, and then for each region within the master list, if that account is in another list of accounts, we have some policies that run on management accounts, some policies that run on dev. So based on if that account is in another list, it calls additional child functions for that account. Okay, so instead of having thousands of Lambda functions for Cloud Custodian, there's 4. This is also all deployed with Terraform because I changed the SDK. Normally, it would just be deployed by a Cloud Custodian run. And the invoker function is deployed in Rust because this is the perfect instance for Rust if you're familiar with programming languages. So Python is an interpreted language. Rust is a systems programming language, so it needs to be compiled. But it is faster, more memory safe, and more cost efficient than Python. And not everything is good for Rust, but in this circumstance where there's a microservice that's doing one thing over and over again, this is the perfect stance for Rust. So I wrote the invoker function in Rust, and there's a CI/CD pipeline that deploys that is running in EKS, mounting onto an EFS volume, and it compiles the Rust code that's in Git because we don't want to push all the huge Rust compiled code into Git with its dependencies. And then another stage of that CI/CD pipeline comes in and builds the Docker container, and then pushes it up to ECR, which the Lambda function, the invoker Lambda function runs the ECR container instead of having the code in the function as Python. So you may be thinking, Mandy, that's a lot of AWS resources to do some open source thing. Is that even worth it? Yes, because all of these resources, the cost for running this is so much smaller than compute or RDS or EBS volumes. So it is worth it to do all of this work and build something. Also for notifications, we have a policy that runs and sends the notification. So if there's an action going to be taken on a resource, then the notifications policy will send to an SNS topic, and then there's a Lambda forwarder that I wrote that customizes the notification message based on the resource type and the action. And then that sends to another SNS topic that has subscriptions that are filtered based on account number. So that is our current Cloud Custodian setup. And this is a GitHub repository that I made that has a little bit of, policies, some policies that I'm gonna go over today, nothing big, but you can go there to see some example policies. Most of these are plug and play, but sorry. Here's an example of a Cloud Custodian policy. And I've sat in FinOps things where people were like, they show a policy like this and they say, everyone should be able to read YAML, and then they just move to the next slide. And I'm not gonna assume that you know how to read YAML. So this is yet another markup language is what YAML stands for. And it's based on indentation. So you see policies, everything under that is part of a policy. And then you have the dash name, that's one policy. So this policy is explaining, this policy is for EC2 instances. We see that on the resource. And it's under the filters section, it's checking the state of the instance, the name of that state, okay, whether the EC2 instance is running or if it's stopped. And if it's stopped, okay, then check the next one. If this type, state age, so if the state age of this resource, this stopped instance, okay, so if it's been stopped, OP stands for operation, greater than or equal to days, 30 days. So basically that second type line is saying, if this instance has been stopped, has been in the state of stopped for greater than or equal to 30 days, then go to actions section, terminate the instance. Okay, that's an example of a policy that we have. This is a common policy that you've probably seen in a lot of like garbage collection policy instances. So a story here on seeing code and hearing code stories at FinOps. Last year, I went to FinOps X for the first time, and I was in a chalk talk about optimizing beyond the obvious, and there were a lot of smart people in there, and I learned a whole lot. And one guy was like, you know, I just changed all of my EC2 instances in the dev environment to T2 micro, and nobody even knew. And I was like, wow, that's such a great idea. So I went back to my manager when I came back from FinOps, all pumped and ready. And I was like, hey, I heard the story. I want to try this. Like, what do you think? He was like, okay, just like let me know when you do it. So I'm like, okay. So we're deploying in Terraform. I chose one dev environment. I changed all of our instances to T2 micro. So I changed R6i extra large, which is memory intensive workloads, to T2 micro, which is the lowest general purpose instance. And I just Terraform applied that locally, didn't push it to Git, didn't, you know, stand on the down low, and then just logged off for the weekend. It's a Friday afternoon, as engineers do. And because nothing's gonna happen, you know. And then we got through the weekend, Monday morning. Actually, it was Monday afternoon in my time zone. My manager messaged, he was like, hey, Dev is yelling, can you undo what you did? And I undid it, and everything is fine now. So disclaimer, don't take my word for it, and don't take other people's word for it. Everybody's got their stories of what they've done and all these cool things, but definitely check utilization and check what is best for your environment. A better change in that instance for like a R6i XL would have been an R6a XL instance. It's in the same family, or a more aggressive one would be a R6i large instead. Here is another example of YAML policies. This was our biggest saver. EBS volumes is a big cost for us. I'm sure you have a similar story. And so this one is different from the EC2 one that we saw earlier, because EC2 instances have that state age value, and EBS volumes do not. So you see in the filter section for this policy, it's just checking the attachments, and it's seeing if the attachments is an empty list. So there isn't like a value that says if the attachments have been empty for X amount of time, or that's kind of like a similar thing to the EC2 instances state age. So there's two policies on this page, because once an EBS volume is unattached, which means it has no attachments, and it is orphaned, then Cloud Custodian marks it for operation. That's what the action part says on the left, operation for delete in days 30. And then at the same time, we have another policy that's running, which is deleting the marked EBS volumes. So it checks to see if it's marked for operation, and then the operation is delete, and then the action is delete it. And Cloud Custodian has the default made status tag, and when an action is marked for OP, delete, in 30 days, it will be tagged with the made status tag, and when the filters are marked for OP, delete, Cloud Custodian checks to see if it's been 30 days from today. That's all part of the open source SDK. It's quite nice. So a story about this one. I was looking at our Cloud Custodian in one account. Only one account did I see this. And I saw that our EBS volumes weren't being deleted, but instead they were being marked every single day. So I would check, and the volume was marked for, say ours was 30, it was marked for 60 days from that day. I would check the next day, it was marked again for 60 days from that day. And I didn't know why this was happening in this account. I confirmed that our policy is right. So can anyone tell me why that would happen? In one account, stuff's getting retagged daily.
Takes the current date and adds 60 days to it every day.
I'm sorry?
Takes the current date and adds 60 days to it every day. That there's a script running on the account that will tag EBS volumes every day.
Not quite. Yes? I'm sorry? Right, yes. This policy does need that in it, but my prod one did actually have the marked for OP in it. But what had happened was someone in that account had also deployed Cloud Custodian. And yes, and their policy was more conservative than our envelope, our like umbrella policy. So in IAS, my group, we are owners of all of the accounts, so I'm deploying this everywhere. But that doesn't mean that other people within their own account that they're owners of, they can also deploy it. So because I was using the mark for OP, the default made status tag, when they were also using the mark for OP, they were overwriting our tag. And so the solution to this was in the actions section and in the filter section, there's a type mark for OP, and then under that you put tag, and then you can say what tag you want it to be marked for. And Then in the filters, you say type, on the right side, you say type marked for OP, and then what tag you want to check to see if it's marked for. So that is something that I knew about, but I hadn't done when I implemented it the first time, and I was like, it's fine. And then I learned why they have that special tagging section there. And this is guardrails. So since I was learning FinOps at the same time as AWS, I didn't know what guardrails were, and I didn't really hear the word guardrails until into my FinOps journey. And I was like, okay, I implemented these cost savings things. I wanna implement a guardrail. Like, what is that? It just seemed like it was something fancy and something higher than what I had done. And in fact, guardrails are not any more fancy than the policies that I showed you earlier. They are remediating or modifying instead of deleting. So the two policies that I showed you earlier were deleting garbage or deleting waste or unused resources. Guardrails are just modifying existing resources to conform to previously determined best practices. So the basic example, we have GP2 to GP3, and on the right we have log group retention. So the main difference with this one is instead of deleting an EBS volume or checking its attachments, the one on the left, you see the filters. We're checking the volume type, whether it's GP2, and then we're checking to see if it's modifiable. And in actions, we are modifying it and changing it to GP3. This is another basic Cloud Custodian or cost savings function. And on the right, we see CloudWatch log retentions never expire policy. So this is checking for your CloudWatch log groups, and if in the filters, if a value of retention in days is absent, then there is no retention. There's unlimited retention for these logs. That is expensive, so we change that to whatever retention you want. And for a lot of ours, if you're forwarding your logs to like an observability third party, we just change that to 1 because we don't need to be paying for them in CloudWatch. So that is what I have. So I'm grateful to the foundation for allowing me to speak, and I am open for questions. If you have any, please ask away.
There you go. Great presentation. Just curious, did you happen to contribute back the invoker code and change?
I didn't, but I can add it to the repo I put. I can add a little, like I explained it right here,
Yeah.
But in the SDK I changed like 3 files, utils, handler, and policy.
Okay.
And I basically changed it so that it will accept the account number, accept the region, and create another, like the default, it keeps the existing STS session for Lambda, and I changed that to not keep that and create a new one each time.
Okay.
And then the policies file within the Lambda handler, I changed to take a new policies file and then,
Yeah, I got you. No, that's the problem we're running into with hundreds and hundreds of accounts.
Yeah.
And Lambda functions in every single account. It's not going to work for us. So.
Yep.
Thanks.
Well, that's the joy of open source, is that you can take it and make it as what fits your use case.
You mentioned that you use Terraform. How do you think about using Terraform and Cloud Custodian at the same time?
So what do you mean?
How do you modify resources that are already codified, or change them, or delete them?
So our existing environments that are being deployed in Terraform, we've shifted left most of our best practices. So Terraform isn't going to deploy like a GP2 volume. So when we're modifying in that way, these aren't, these are either like automatically created, like log groups. Those are automatically created when you create a Lambda function. It's not, you don't have to like add something to that. But that's a great question. I haven't seen that, at least in our environments. We have the Terraform is what it should be, and it's usually changes in the console that we're correcting.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I have a question on Lambda loop, especially the invocations. I manage what I call C3 process. I'm the product lead. It has a lot to do with what my engineers do, and I have to make them correct it. That's why I'm bringing up this question about, it had to do with Lambda invoking itself recursively. What do you think from this approach? How would you put that into a policy? Because what happened is that the configurations was bad and the endpoint was kept on repeating itself, that in a day we had to accrue $6,000 every day because of that mistake. And I was thinking of it to have it as a policy.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. I haven't seen that before, but there's probably a guardrail in some way that you can make for that. But if the code inside the Lambda function is calling itself, I don't know if, like, at least Cloud Custodian isn't checking the code within the Lambda function. In Terraform, how we deploy it, we use like a null resource that you can have a command run in Bash or PowerShell, however you have your Terraform running. And at least in this solution, I'm using the same handler Python program in all of the Lambda functions. And what I'm doing in that null command that runs before I'm deploying the Lambda functions in Terraform is I'm copying that file in and then changing the file name to be the correct path for that function. So you could probably do some kind of guardrail like that in Terraform if that's how you're deploying it in code. But if you're deploying it in code, you should probably like have code reviews anyway, saying like, why is this calling itself? But you could probably figure it out in that sense somehow. Yeah, tricky circumstance though. Thank you.
Got a question back.
Hi, you mentioned about the storage EBS volume earlier, the deletion. What happens when the unattached EBS volume, so it's flagged, and then what happens if it becomes attached? Because sometimes they would detach it and then attach it to somewhere else. Does that revert that flagging?
Yes. So that's a great question. You're talking about this. So there is a third policy that I did not include on this page because there's a lot of code already, and it's called EBS unmark used. So if the EBS is marked for operation and the attachments is not null and it's being used, then unmark it, remove the tag. And that's in the Cloud Custodian documentation too. This is just like basic Cloud Custodian example. Yeah, so any policy that has a marking aspect has the action on that marked and then the unmark it in case things change.
Thanks, Mandy, for the wonderful presentation today.
Thank you.
I think you showed the example with AWS so if you want to implement the same thing with Azure, that should not be complicated, is that right?
Well, I mean, this solution isn't exactly simple. So I wouldn't say that it's going to be more complicated in another cloud, but it just depends on what you know. We're mainly in AWS, and I knew AWS, but you can have Cloud Custodian in Azure, GCP, other clouds. So there's no reason why you can't implement something like this there too.
Hi. What's the downside of having Lambdas deployed in all the regions, all the accounts? Because from a cost perspective, it's only when they run. Or is it because they're all running, there's so many of them, they're all running, it actually does incur a cost? And the Lambda that you have is centralized, so there's 4. So it's assuming roles into other accounts, right?
Right.
Doing things. So is the downside really a cost issue? Or is it just a management of all the things?
The downside for us was the management, and because we didn't want people to tamper with the existing working functions. So like I explained, we had somebody deploy their own functions in their account. So we didn't want anybody to mess with our working functions. We wanted to keep that access off, and Control Tower, you could have changed that, but at the time we, for reasons, didn't use that. I don't know if we had the abilities to use that. So I've heard Lambda, if you deploy it, has bigger cost if you deploy it out of the box, like how Cloud Custodian recommends or provides, but we didn't do it, so I don't know, at least in our case.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got time for more questions? Okay.
Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
And I have a question. So do you plug into monitoring data when looking at recommendations? And also, how do you address performance concerns from your engineers?
So the first question was performance data?
Yeah, like do you plug into Datadog or any other monitoring tools to pick up your recommendations, or do you just go by recommendations provided by AWS?
We
out
have,
of box?
Right, we have our FinOps team and management normally is doing the recommendations for that, and I'm just doing the code. So they have their ways. It's not my business, but what was your second question?
It's more about performance degradation concerns from your engineers when you set up these policies.
Right.
To right size an instance by the like downsize, basically.
Performance. I'm missing the question. Sorry, but we do have a observability dashboard that I created for this that shows what Cloud Custodian is doing, and so we do use that. Yeah.
Cool. Any more? All right, then we'd like to thank you, Mandy, for a great presentation.
Great, thank you.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.